Alice Cooper's name is always associated with murder on stage, eyes as cold and dark as Hell's Gates opening wide, and cries that make your blood boil behind dense smoke curtains. He is more than just a vocalist. The audience joyfully becomes followers in a show filled of blood, snakes, guillotines, electric chairs, and dashed young ambitions. And he is also the leader of a theater cult in which every performance is a ritual sacrifice. Alice Cooper was more than just a singer. He was the first to transform rock into a spiritual and artistic experience. He was a cosmos where weirdos no longer had to hide their weirdness and damaged youngsters could express their suffering in a way that no one else could hear. He was also a universe in which he was reborn as freedom, fear, and death after having been a sick, lonely preacher's child. He founded shock rock and served as a model for bands like Rob Zombie, Slipknot, Marilyn Manson, and America's worst fear on television throughout the 1970s. He hacked off his own head on stage while wearing snakes and painted like a devil, at a time when having long hair was already considered a sign of resistance. He was still viewed as a dark messiah by millions of people. Alice Cooper, however, is a living contradiction, despite the fact that she laughs eerily and has black eyes. A world-class golfer, a devoted spouse, a fervent Christian, and a guy who plunged into horrific drinking before finding salvation via religion, love, and music before passing away at an advanced age. He persisted. He continued to be the center of attention. Alice Cooper remains. It is a speaker to the lost, as well as a monster on stage. Even if you believe you know everything there is to know about him, this narrative will make you doubt it. Are you prepared to attend Alice Cooper's hell on stage? Early years. On February 4th, 1948, Alice Cooper was born in Detroit, Michigan. The sounds of Sunday morning songs blended with the hum of motors in this chilly city full of industry. Nevertheless, Vincent Damon Fournier did not grow up like other children. From the time he breathed, fate placed him in two different worlds, holy and monstrous, light and black. In the Jesus Christ Church of God, Vince's family has a long history of being devout evangelical preachers. His father, Arthur Fournier Jr., was a kind-hearted preacher, and his grandfather, evangelist Arthur Moroni Fournier, was a leader. Beyond the Bible, they read more. Every word of it was their way of life. From an early age, Vincent was surrounded by lectures, prayers, and a sense of holiness that permeated every space. Sin and redemption coexisted in a society of laws, symbols, and reverence. Vincent, however, was unable to escape being a sick youngster. Despite coming from a deeply devout family, he was fragile and frequently ill, and he spent a lot of time in hospital. In the hopes that the warm, dry climate might aid in their son's recovery, the family relocated to Phoenix, Arizona. For him, this decision marked the first intersection of light and darkness. When Vincent was in Arizona, laying in a hospital bed alone himself for extended periods of time, he didn't think about angels. Halloween, masks, old horror films on late-night TV, and the terrifying images of death all piqued his curiosity. Instead of sunny skies, he depicted characters who were half real and half nightmarish, as well as grim funerals and bloody stages. Though not in the way his parents had planned, he began to hear voices of performance and art. Vincent was divided from an early age between the devils in his imagination and the actual world, between God's moral laws and the attraction of the forbidden. A dual personality was produced by that life, which was founded on faith yet also flourished in the dark. There's the decent church boy on one side. The other was Alice Cooper, a man who came to represent theater, horror, and revolt. Vince Fournier wasn't destined to be a singer early in his career. His voice was not very good. Wasn't the kind of child whose parents pushed him to pursue a career in the arts, and wasn't good at playing any instruments. One thing, nevertheless, was universally acknowledged. He was skilled at capturing people's interest, and the school stage was the ideal setting for Vincent, who was then a teenager, to go mad. In order to participate in the school's talent competition in 1964, Vincent formed a fictitious band with a few close pals, including Glenn Buxton on guitar, Dennis Dunaway on bass, and John Spear on drums. Vincent was still attending Cortez High School in Phoenix. The Earwigs were a group of people who were not musicians. They lip-synced to tapes of Beatles songs while playing wooden imitation guitars. However, that deception proved to be a surprising triumph. The race was won by them. Additionally, they discovered something crucial. They wanted to start a legitimate band. Vincent took on the role of lead vocalist for the first time as the Earwigs swiftly transformed into the Spiders. He was there, not because of his voice. He dressed to stand out, dyed his hair black, and wore shoddy jewelry. He made every effort to draw attention to himself. If he lacked talent, he would put up a show. If he wasn't already a star, he would make himself a phenomenon. The Spiders were playing rock and roll. They performed in school gyms, industries, and parties. Additionally, they acquired a large following among Phoenix's youth over time. The band put up a lot of effort. They stopped simply imitating the Beatles and began creating their own sound, which was a blend of garage rock, psychedelic tones, and a tragic atmosphere, despite appearing wild and rebellious. It was released in 1966 with the title Why Don't You Love Me? After that, they began performing in Los Angeles under the new name The Nas. But there was no luck. Todd Rundgren's band already had The Nas, so they had to alter their name once more. Alice Cooper was born at that time. In the theater, his name would become a symbol of absolute evil when he was upset and sought to startle people by sounding like a kind old church lady. It was amusing because Vincent was the only member of the band with that name. When Vincent Funia mocked a high school Beatles homage, he began to create a theatrical persona that was unlike anything the world had ever seen. Alice Cooper was more than just a band with Vincent at its core. It was a display of sight, music, and unadulterated emotion. It seemed like a real-life Halloween. Gorgeous chaos that moved and shined. When Shock Raw first started, no one anticipated that Alice Cooper, who sounds like a nice middle-aged woman, would turn into the most diabolical, murderous, and horrifying character on the rock stage. However, that struggle helped Vincent Fournier discover his identity. He did the exact opposite of what everyone expected him to do. 10 times. Vincent was the band's unofficial lead singer when Alice Cooper relocated to Los Angeles in the late 1960s. Among the hundreds of bands that were emerging like weeds, they struggled to establish a reputation. Many of their early performances were a failure. Confusion erupted, people departed, and the electricity was switched off. But Vince didn't give up. If they didn't understand, he would make sure they would always remember him. At that moment, Alice Cooper's stage became a temple to desire. It was no longer just music. There were broken dolls, guillotines, newies, fake blood, genuine snakes, and Vincent transforming into a narrative character named Alice, who was both aesthetically pleasing and repulsed on stage. He was no longer himself. He transformed into something entirely new, dark, menacing, hypnotic, and provocative. With the assistance of fellow avant-garde legend Frank Zappa, Alice Cooper secured a contract to release their debut album, Pretty's for You, in 1969. It was their first statement, despite its poor box office performance. Strange, dramatic, and blatantly unique. Things drastically altered when they relocated to Detroit, an industrial, gritty city where people preferred a musical smack in the face over polished melodies. Alice Cooper found himself in their secure haven. Their war cry was the popular song, I'm 18 from their 1971 album, Love It to Death, a bewildered adolescent tune that became the catchphrase of a lost generation. Alice Cooper was more than simply a band after that. They were significant. Every night throughout their travels, Alice was put to death by guillotine, which was so realistic that it made me shudder. The audience returned for more. Horrified at first, then captivated. Vincent Fournier did not merely create a fictional character. He created a distinct subgenre of music and visuals known as shock rock. The stage was a site of both liberation and punishment, and there was no story told by the artist. He became the villain that the public desired to witness. Alice Cooper was more than simply a band name after that. He was exclusively referred to by that name. Following numerous appearances and stage deaths, Vincent eventually accepted one reality. He was no longer Vince Fournier. He was always Alice Cooper, not only on stage. The best kind of success. Alice Cooper was more than simply a rock star at the height of his career. He was a symbol of society. The Alice Cooper Band dominated all major venues between 1971 and 1975, defied convention, and altered what was deemed appropriate for mainstream performances. The Beatles' 1972 album, School's Out, cemented their fame at a time when Alice Cooper was screaming about how society was collapsing, how young people were being smothered, and the horrors of city life, while the Beatles were singing about love. The title track of the album became a global anthem for young rebellion. Some schools even prohibited it out of concern that it would lead to fights in the classroom, but it only enhanced the narrative. Has anyone else ever wished that the school walls might be torn down? Who hadn't wanted to shout schools out indefinitely as a means of achieving freedom? People were stunned by more than just that. Alice Cooper was an excellent performer. They spent a lot of money making the stage resemble an execution site during the 1973 $1 billion Babies tour. Heads hacked off and fell into the throng, along with electric chairs and phony bodies. Within hours, the tickets were sold out. Parents became enraged. The press became enraged. With a chuckle, he added, "And Alice Cooper, this was just one more step towards the monster society needed to confront." The tour was one of the most successful of the decade, and $1 Million Babies immediately shot to the top of the Billboard charts. Not too long ago, Alice Cooper's band was jeered as they left the stage. They had a significant influence on culture in addition to producing excellent music. He wasn't composing music. By 1975, when the band quietly disbanded, he had written manifestos for an age that felt lost, alone, and like they had no place in the world. The personality of Alice Cooper had endured. Vincent Fournier is now legally known as Alice Cooper. The title of his debut solo album was Welcome to My Nightmare. It was more than a record. In this eerie musical theater production, every song served as a scene, and every performance served as a means for everyone to improve their mental health. The terrifying resurrection of the fallen once again captured the attention of everyone on the planet. When Alice Cooper was at his best, he was a generation's delicious fear. However, beneath the terrifying makeup and flaming sets, Vincent Fournier, the actual guy, was going through a nightmare that no one could see. The album Welcome to My Nightmare launched his highly imaginative solo career in 1975, putting an unknowable amount of strain on him while also propelling him to a new degree of artistic accomplishment. Tio is larger, more repulsive, and more frightening than he formerly was. He used alcohol as a coping mechanism, as a crutch at first, later as a serious addiction. What began with a couple nighttime wiseys evolved into a bottle of bourbon per day. By the late 1970s, Cooper was no longer performing as a monster on stage. He was a drug-addled monster who was disintegrating. A man who was getting lost was featured on the 1977 album Lace and Whiskey. Maurice E.S. Carrargo, an odd-stage detective, was presented. He was no longer understood by those in the room. He was ridiculed by the media, and Cooper was no longer able to control the monster he had created. In 1978, he was admitted due to his alcoholism, an extremely personal record that revealed how an addict's mind collapses and how a wounded soul is shattered emerge from that internal struggle. The descent, however, was far from ended. The early 1980s saw the emergence of albums like Zipper Catches Skin, Duh, and Special Forces. These were artistic endeavors undertaken during periods of relapse, recovery, and relapse. There was no longer any fear of Alice Cooper. He apologized. The noises had lost their frightening quality. They were quite concerned. However, Cooper would not allow the terror to persist indefinitely, just as he would not allow one of his most spectacular stage resurrections to do so. Things began to shift in the mid-1980s. For the first time in nearly a decade, his life became clear after he got clean and quit smoking. Constrictor made his comeback in 1986 as a darker, sexier, but still dominant Alice Cooper. The Nightmare Returns tour represented the real-life resurrection of a hero who had nearly perished and was now standing tall and commanding like never before. In 1989, the explosion was actually caused by rubbish. Cooper collaborated with John Bon Jovi and Desmond Child on the song Poison. After nearly 15 years, it placed him back in the Billboard Top 10. It was a survivor, a freed artist, who yelled not just to shock but to save everyone, instead of a weary soul behind the lights this time. After that, Alice Cooper had nothing else to show. He founded shock rock and influenced bands like Slipknot, Rob Zombie, and Marilyn Manson. His performances were no longer merely frightening. They became theater rock temples that demonstrate that monsters may be rescued if they confront themselves and continue to rise from the grave. Life in general. Although Alice Cooper is referred to as the monster of rock theater, most people wouldn't believe that he is a devoted Christian, a loving family guy, and a soul that has found peace through faith beneath his horrific makeup and furious performances on stage. In 1976, Vincent D'Onofrio wed dancer Cheryl Goddard. Over the course of more than 40 years, they have endured addiction, rebirth, and the frequent changes in the spotlight. Alice Cooper fulfilled his vow to love and only love one woman for the rest of his life during the wedding. Despite the fact that relationships in the music industry frequently end after a tour, Cooper has always taken pride in being a good father to their 3 children. He doesn't use his family as a crutch, though. Rather, he perceives them as an invisible force that kept him stable during a time when everything else was collapsing. For him, family represents the end of the tunnel. Real life begins there and the show ends. However, the most significant turning event may have been Cooper's return to Christianity, not simply as a ritual, but with genuine belief. He once warned me that I needed a guide since I was on the verge of damnation. He did it quietly, deeply, and steadily. He didn't utilize his faith as a means of gaining attention. He prays daily, attends church once a week, and never hesitates to declare, "I'm a Christian, and my name is Alice Cooper." When he reflects on his life, he feels no remorse for his actions. He made mistakes and felt lost at times, but he overcame them and utilized them as inspiration for his paintings. If it helped him understand himself better and love those around him more, he didn't squander a scar or an addiction. Alice Cooper may not be a saint, but he is also not the monster that many once believed him to be. The serenity of his faith, his children's laughing, and his wife's eyes have brought him comfort today. This is more powerful than the cries of the masses, the past, and the authority. There had never been anything like what Alice Cooper did. Amidst coiled snakes, flying heads, red lights, fake blood, and screams that sounded like they were right out of hell. With themes, messages, and rituals as sinister as a sacrament, he transformed rock music into a terrifying performance. He was not just a musician. He authored plays, directed, performed, and starred in a show that combined dark humor, obsession, and tragedy in every riff. Since the late 1960s, when the majority of artists were still interested in political protest or hippie ideals, Alice has followed a road that is entirely distinct, startling, unsettling, and profound. Every action, in his opinion, was more than just a conflict between the ego and fear, between social conventions and our inner demons. As a result, he became the archetype for an entire generation of performers. Marilyn Manson's seductive actions, Rob Zombie's terrifying movie-style performances, Slipknot's masks and violent stage performances, and Kiss's usage of fireworks and black and white paint. They all stand on the shoulders of Alice Cooper, the artist who brought nightmares to life, whether they like it or not. Critics were unable to avoid him. According to Rolling Stone, because he was genuine and exposed the unvarnished realities that we attempt to conceal, he frightened and enthralled people and symbolized the evil in all of us. In February 2011, he was ultimately accepted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. For an artist who not only revitalized rock, but also transformed it into an expressive art form, it was a long overdue but well-deserved honor. Alice Cooper is not merely a performer. He is a frightening and alluring character of evil in popular culture. His impact endures in music and in every common fear that everyone harbors in secret, even as the performers fade away and new generations emerge on stage today. At 77, Alice Cooper is still unstoppable. He has spent decades living in his own shadow and away from the spotlight. Yet he is still riding his tail by returning to the beginning. 2025 was a significant year that nobody anticipated. He reunited with his former band after more than 50 years, released a brand new album, and embarked on one of the largest tours of his career. On July 25th, 2025, Alice Cooper reunited alongside Neil Smith on drums, Dennis Dunaway on bass, and Michael Bruce on guitar, transporting fans back to the 1970s. Together, they created Billion Dollar Babies, School's Out, and Love It to Death. The Revenge of Alice Cooper, the new album, was more than just a musical comeback. Created by Bob Ezrin, the same visionary who influenced Cooper's style, it harked back to the origins of horror rock. The album featured fresh recordings of the late guitarist Glenn Buxton, and Robbie Kager of The Doors made a creepy cameo on the song Black Mamba, which added to its uniqueness. This was not a retrospective. They were really daring in what they said. No matter how much time has gone by, Alice Cooper remains one of the most eerie and compelling tales in rock and roll. However, Cooper was not content with merely a studio release. In May 2025, he started the Too Close for Comfort tour, which included performances in numerous major US and European cities. He teamed up with Judas Priest in the autumn, creating a potent duo of two heavy metal titans that enthralled audiences from Toronto to Los Angeles and from New York to Berlin with a wild and surreal rock performance. Alice Cooper stopped using drugs and alcohol about 42 years ago. His business and life were saved by that decision. He currently plays golf every morning and oversees the Solid Rock Foundation. In addition, he has a contented life with his spouse, Cheryl, who accompany him both on and off stage. For Alice, the journey within is equally as significant as any immersion in roaring guitars and artificial blood. I will never be able to retire. Alice Cooper is still writing songs, organizing new performances, signing photos, and grinning broadly. In addition, she continues to be the most exquisite nightmare rock creation ever. He uses age as a prop. He'll show up with his half-scary, half-joking chuckle and black and white makeup to remind us that even monsters have hearts as long as there are lights and people around. My name is Alice Cooper. He used to be the worst thing you could see on stage, complete with skulls, guillotines, enormous snakes, and makeup that looked like it belonged in a nightmare. But he now leads a life of being a monster and acting like a good guy. Behind the mask, Alice Cooper is a calm individual amid the chaotic world of rock and roll, a loving father, and a loyal husband. As one of the most well-known and enduring musicians in contemporary music history, he has endured every temptation and every depth, from addiction to mental collapse. Alice Cooper is still in charge of the stage at the age of 77. Younger folks are now moved by his life narrative. Try your hardest, be truthful, and don't allow the past interfere with your future. The fact that Alice Cooper does strange things on stage does not make him a celebrity. In a world full with lies, he chose truth, which is why he is famous. He chose to be truthful in a field that frequently devours souls. He never lost his voice, even in the midst of a boisterous audience. A lifetime of transforming into the monster to express what others were afraid to speak, then stealthily exiting the stage to revert to being a man. Alice Cooper is not simply the most stunning figure in rock. She is also kind, modest, and clear-eyed. He demonstrates that even in the darkest circumstances, a heart capable of love, belief, and turning back to the light is possible.